What do you make of this Wall Street Journal article about Nord Stream that they have their explanation now for what happened? So lots of speculation in the Chinese social media is the West in the process of abandoning Zelensky, Zelensky. I mean, are they? Is that what the purpose of the article?
Well, the thing that struck me, both about the article and about the German indictment, the thing that struck me immediately was that the Germans have issued an indictment against somebody who they say is Vladimir Z. Now, why do they not give his name? I mean, there is no actual legal reason, by the way, why they would not name this person.
Hmm.
Now, who else is Volodymyr Z? I mean, I accept this might just be coincidence or somebody slipped, but I don't believe that. I think that there is a faction in Germany and in the United States. I mean, we talked about the people who gamble, but there's the other side as well. We say, look, this has gone far enough. The Ukrainians are out of control. The whole situation is getting out of control. This is the time to bring it all to a stop. So we now identify the Ukrainians as being responsible for Nord Stream. Whether or not that was true, by the way, I don't know whether or not it was true, but we said it was the Ukrainians. We issued this indictment against Volodymyr Z,
Uh-huh.
who probably is a real person. By the way, the Russians say that his real name is Zhuravlyov.
Okay. Okay.
Vladimir Zhuravlyov. But this is from the Russians. They're having lots of fun over Volodymyr Z, by the way.
Mhm.
And that, again, there are people in the Pentagon, in the German military, who are looking at the military situation in Ukraine. They're saying the situation is completely out of control. Germany's having budget problems. The European economies are in a bad way. This is the time to call a stop. I think that there is that view, and I think this is what the Nord Stream um, revelations, if I can call them that, were all about.
Okay. And in the midst of all this, Putin just visited Azerbaijan.
Yeah.
What is that about? Well,
Right. It's
purpose.
about it's about getting Azerbaijan eventually to join the BRICS
Okay.
because
Okay.
it is a major oil and gas producer. It's a rich country in resource terms. It's
Mhm.
by far the richest country in the Southern Caucasus. It's previously shown interest in aligning with the West, and the Russians absolutely do not want that to happen. It borders on Iran and, by the way, on Russia through the Caspian. It's a major Caspian sea power. And sure enough, directly after Putin returned to Moscow, Azerbaijan announced that it's now applying to join the BRICS. I think this is exactly what it was about. So,
Yeah, yeah. And then I want to ask you now, BRICS, they announced that they're going to temporarily suspend
yes,
to take in new members.
yes,
So my understanding, I think Lavrov is the one who announced this, and the purpose is they want to have some kind of a discussion internally in terms of
yes,
how they want to run the organization before they
yes,
take in the
yes,
group, which makes sense to me. Is that your take on
absolutely.
that?
I completely agree, and I think that's entirely right. By the way, before the big expansion that was announced in South Africa last year,
Uh-huh.
I said at the time I thought that expansion, the risk was that expansion was running out of control,
Yeah, yeah.
there needed to be a clearer structure established first, because if you just had all sorts of countries joining, however and in whatever the way they wanted, it risks degenerating into a talking shop. And I
Mhm.
think this is what they're going to do. But notice that Azerbaijan is the first country um, of the first former Soviet republic, other than Russia itself, to make a formal application that I'm aware of to join the BRICS. And as I said, it's a major energy producer and it's strategically an important country. And I am sure that the Russians want to propel it in that direction, though, of course, it will not join this year.
Yeah, yeah. I also think it makes sense that
Mhm.
they have some kind of a rule how to govern this, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, because in the beginning it wasn't much of a economic bloc. I mean, the
No.
concept of BRICS is coming from the West, right?
Yes.
From which bank was it that somebody
Yes,
was in?
it's American economist. I think he was at Goldman Sachs, wasn't he? He
Yeah,
he
Goldman
he came
Sachs,
up.
yes.
Goldman Sachs, yeah.
Yeah, and then the BRIC countries like, okay, maybe we can just talk a little bit. That was
Yeah.
how it started, right? It wasn't
Yes.
really purposefully to establish to do anything. That yeah, so it's very loose. Yeah,
Absolutely. What changed it was when the United States started to change the rules of economic trade. When the moment that started to happen, the moment the United States started to impose sanctions on everybody and apply economic pressure on everybody, use the dollar in all kinds of ways,
hmm
countries that want to trade with each other said, "Look, we've got to find alternatives." And there was the BRICS to hand, and they said, "Well, let's use this mechanism to do it," and that's how it's happened.
yeah. And also the BRICS pay. I think Nabulina just maybe not that long ago announced that there are 159 countries are interested.
Yes.
But then again, I think it's the alternative to SWIFT. It's not purpose to replace the SWIFT,
No.
right? Because many countries, including China, Saudi and all the countries, they still have a lot of dollar-based assets. So they
Yes.
still need to trade through SWIFT. And so there is, but clearly there's interest. If there are that many, 159 countries interested, that's pretty significant, isn't
It
it?
is indeed. It is indeed. Now, I mean, you're absolutely correct. I would just point out, by the way, that there are many Russian banks that are still connected to SWIFT.
Oh,
It's
okay.
the state. It's the state banks that are not, but you can still access SWIFT
Okay.
in Russia, and the Russians also will not want to completely replace Swift for
Mhm.
that, at least for the moment,
Mhm.
and for that reason. Again, these alternative systems, the alternative to Swifts that we're talking about, are only being created because of the way in which the West weaponized Swift.
Yeah.
It's not about Swift itself.
Mm.
Swift was seen as a good thing,
Yeah.
and there's no reason to dismantle something that is good and useful. The problem is that it's become dangerous to use. And the idea also, I suspect, is that if you can set up an alternative, there is less likely, it is less likely that the Americans will be able to weaponize Swift in the way that they have done before.
Yeah. The United States is so interesting because you hear politicians always talking about, okay, power comes with the responsibilities. They don't practice it, right?
No,
The SWIFT is a very powerful tool, but then when you use it, you cannot abuse it because when you
exactly.
abuse it, there will be consequences.
Yes.
They don't seem to understand that. They don't seem to care about that. It seems like.
Well, this is exactly correct. I mean, having the world's reserve currency, having a system like SWIFT, dominating the international financial system, obviously it gives you great economic advantages, but it
Yeah.
is also a trust.
Yeah.
It's the world trusting you
Yeah.
to run the system in a certain way, and the Americans lost sight of that and have abused this trust,
Yeah.
with the results that we see.
Okay, Gaza situation.
Yeah.
There's some kind of a peace deal, but is it that a real ceasefire deal? It seems very odd because the Hamas wasn't even there during the negotiation.
Mm.
And and then the odd thing to me is Blinken came out saying, "Oh, Netanyahu agreed to this and that." Why doesn't Netanyahu come out and saying we agreed to this? It seems like okay, if you're negotiating between A and B, and then C came said, okay, we have this peace deal that A agrees to. We're waiting for B. It's very odd to me. Is that a real ceasefire deal?
No, it's not a real ceasefire deal, and there cannot be a ceasefire in Gaza until the fundamental problem of an Israeli government led by Benjamin Netanyahu that does not want a ceasefire and that wants to prolong the conflict and perhaps expand it to Iran. Until that problem is solved, I don't think there can be a ceasefire. What happens is the moment we are close to getting an agreed ceasefire, Netanyahu comes along and says, "Look, this isn't good enough. I may have to agreed to all of this before, but now I've got more conditions, and I'm not going to finalize my agreement until those conditions are satisfied." And he's going to go on doing this um, forever. In order to get a ceasefire, and Hamas have said this, and we might not like Hamas very much, but
Mhm.
what they're saying here is absolutely correct. Uh, in order for there to be a ceasefire, the United States must do that which it has never done, which is tell the Israelis, look, enough's enough. This is the agreement. We need a ceasefire. These are the conditions. You must accept them. If you don't, we will come out publicly and blame you. And in fact, if necessary, take the matter back to the UN Security Council, which has called for a ceasefire, and see whether sanctions can be imposed under Chapter 7.
Mhm.
Now, if you do that, you will get a ceasefire because Netanyahu can't say no. But the US has never shown any willingness to do that.
Now, this seems to me is an issue for the Democratic Party, isn't it? That
Yeah.
if we are now talking to the U.S. Politics, so the past few days, as you know, the Democratic Party convention is now
Mm.
ongoing, and there is plenty of people outside the Chicago's convention protesting. It
Yes.
seems to me like this is particular an issue for the Democratic Party more so than the Republicans. The
Yes.
Republicans seems like we settled, we're going to support Israel no matter what.
Yeah.
The Democrat are the ones who talking about ceasefire because they have large supporters are Muslims and Palestinians, etc. Or there are lots of people sympathize to
Yeah.
the Palestinians, etc. So what they're doing seems to me like just like most things they do, they're not sincere. They want to have the surface, right? They want to give you the impression that they're doing something. There is a ceasefire, but it's not the real because they have this problem. Is that what it is?
That's exactly what it is. I mean, the Democratic Party is a very weird construction because, on the one hand, it sets itself up as the progressive side of the American political scene. As a result, it attracts the support of a lot of young people. It attracts people from many communities, black people, Muslim people, people of that kind. At the same time, it is absolutely part of the American establishment. It is,
Mhm.
in fact, the core of the
Yeah,
American establishment.
everything is
So,
true.
which is, of course, 100% squarely behind Israel. So they have to try and find some way of keeping their supporters happy whilst at the same time, not really changing anything. So they
Mhm.
go through the motions about getting ceasefires negotiated in Gaza. But of course, they don't really mean that. The only kind of ceasefire that the United States and Israel would unequivocally back was one which amounted to a complete capitulation by Hamas. Unless that happens, which it won't, they will never, they will, what the Democrats will do, the Democratic administration will do, is that they will go through the motions of pretending that they're negotiating a ceasefire. And when a ceasefire fails to happen, they will blame Hamas. I mean that's the approach they've taken. By the way, this has been true ever since I can remember, going all the way back to the late 1960s.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's why we never have peace because
That's
there's
why we
never
never had peace.
there's never sincere effort from the
No,
United States.
no.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
have never been good faith negotiations to
Mhm.
settle the Arab Israeli conflict.
Mhm.
Never, not once. The Israelis have never really been interested in a just and lasting peace. Always they've pursued their maximalist objectives, which is total victory over the Arab populations in Palestine. And the Americans have never been sincere about their position as mediators. They set themselves up as mediators, but what they really drew is they tried to turn every negotiation into a capitulation to whatever demand the Israelis are making. I've lived through this for decades now. I've seen the same thing happen again and again and again.
What do you make of the Democratic Party convention? It's just a lot of a hoopla, going on. I haven't watched much of it. I can't stand it many
No,
times.
no.
But what is your impression of it?
It's the strangest election I have ever seen. I mean, I thought 2020 was pretty weird. I thought 2016 was pretty weird. But this one is absolutely bizarre. Firstly, we have a convention in which a small group of people have appointed the candidate. I mean, the convention itself. I mean, it's like a sort of caricature of what the American media pretends Congress is in China, and where actually real debate happens and people talk and discuss things. But if that isn't what's happened in the Democratic Party, everybody goes up, lifts their hands because a small group of people, like the old Soviet Politburo, have told them to. It's that kind of convention. The candidate that's been put forward has no plans, no policies, doesn't give interviews, doesn't make speeches, won't hold press conferences, won't engage in debates, won't appear on television. She's just sort of there. We have pictures everywhere of her. Again, it's the image rather than the reality of the person. They then produce a program for the election, a manifesto, if you
Mhm.
like, for the election, which still continuously refers to Joe Biden as the candidate, not even Kamala Harris. I mean, completely bizarre.
Mhm.
And she then comes up with this very radical seeming proposal to, put controls to stop price gouging and things of that kind, which of course should not. I mean, I've read so many articles trying to take this thing seriously when there's no belief in it. I mean, it probably wouldn't work anyway, but put that aside. Does anybody really believe that Kamala Harris, if she was elected, would do any of these things?
No.
The idea
Mhm.
is absurd.
Yeah. And you talk about this party platform is mentioning, that Joe Biden, which I also find very interesting.
Mhm.
That the party, first of all, the party platform, they put it out before the convention.
Yeah,
Now it's no longer Biden's platform, right? It is the Kamala Harris administration's
yeah.
supposedly the platform, but in there they're still referring to the second term of Biden, which tells us, first of all, Kamala Harris hasn't read it. She cannot have
No,
read it.
no, of course not.
This is her platform, okay?
I know.
And she hasn't read it.
No.
Just tells you how much interest she has for running the country. I was thinking if I were put into her position, the first thing I would do, I would look at the platform, right? I'll do some
Mm,
update. Maybe I'll just write the whole thing, rewrite the whole thing because this is
mm,
now my platform.
yeah,
She hasn't read it. She hasn't updated. The Democratic Party certainly doesn't interested in doing some update.
no,
What I mean, does it just tells me that all these people are interested for Kamala Harris in particular, all she's interested is be the president
yes,
as the
yes,
president, but she's not interested in working as a president to run the country, right?
no. No, absolutely. I mean, this is exactly where we are. I mean, this isn't about electing the president. It's about controlling the presidency and the office and
Okay.
the levers of power. I mean, the United States has gone from being even the kind of very flawed democracy that it claimed to
Hmm.
be, to become simply a situation where everything is controlled by a small group of insiders who who manipulate everybody else like puppets on a string. It's really actually it's very sad, but if you look at it from a distance, it's also rather comical,
Yeah.
actually, to
Yeah.
see this extraordinary divergence between the reality and the rhetoric.
Yeah. The fact that they don't even update their platform, I
No.
find that's extraordinary.
Well, it shows an
Um,
incredible disrespect towards the American people, if I can put it like that. I mean, at the very least.
yeah. And talking about, the people who are really in control in her team, the economic team, there are two guys, Brian Deese, and then there's other guy, Mike Pyle. See, we
Mm,
don't hear these names, but they are
no.
very they clearly has been on in the Biden team for some time, and I suspect probably they were participating in some part of the Obama discussion as well. And they
Mm.
both come from BlackRock. Just
Yeah.
so, just so, and talking about BlackRock, so the I think the Russian media and also the Chinese media has been talking about BlackRock has bought or gets about 17 million hectares of Ukrainian agricultural
Yeah.
land. Now Ukraine denying that. They did that through this thing called the Ukrainian Development Fund, right? What the Chinese media have been highlighting is that apparently the head of the BlackRock, Larry Fink, uh, even banned the bureau of military personnel. I mean, these are Ukrainians soldiers, and apparently Larry Fink, for those land that now belong to BlackRock, they don't want people to bury there. I mean, what does that say? Of course, there are people saying, no, 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 that's not true. But they saying this is Russian propaganda. I actually think if BlackRock owns those land, it's quite possible they would say you cannot use it. You know,
Absolutely, I think it's exactly true. I'm sure it is true. I mean, it's the empire dealing with the colony, and empires always, there's always people who come into the empires from the capital, the imperial capital, and plunder it. And that's what BlackRock is doing. And they have enormous influence in Washington. And as you can see, there's gathering around Kamala Harris now. By the way, it was exactly the same with Britain. I live in Britain.
hmm
If you go around Britain, around London, you see all the vast palatial residences. If you go around the English countryside, you see the vast palatial residences that people used to build. And it's a small country. England is very small. And you look at the size of these places, it's plunder from the West, from the colonies, rather. And if you go back even further to ancient Rome, they did it there too. Only they were even more open about it than the British.
hmm Yeah, yeah, that's another thing I find interesting. They no longer hide. Lots of
Yeah,
times, you can even read it. They kind of like pretty
yeah,
much admit it to.
yeah.
Yeah, they no longer covert, right? Yeah,
No.
that's yeah.